Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is Dr. Jermaine Johnson. He is a community activist, avid volunteer, public servant, and current state representative serving the people of Richland and Kershaw counties. As a husband and proud father, Jermaine knows the value and importance of giving back to the community that has helped him raise his family and grow as a leader. He's also running for re-election in a different district, 52, due to redrawn maps. He's a community leader to the core, having founded a nonprofit specializing in employment assistance services, emphasizing community development and more. He's also the primary sponsor of a bill that would allow municipalities to use instant runoff voting. He is the real deal. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Jermaine Johnson.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Oh, man. Thanks for having me, Deke. I really do appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, man. We were just talking a little bit. So you're also endorsed. You're a Democrat, running as a Democrat, but you've been endorsed by the Forward Party, which my listeners know I came on the advisory board a number of months ago. But I just want to get, first off, I want to ask you, how did you really get involved with public service and have a passion for serving your community? Because you are truly a public servant.
Oh, man. Well, I appreciate it. I was a former professional basketball player. I played basketball at the College of Charleston. Then when I graduated, I played in the NBA D-League. I played in Brazil, Canada, Portugal, and Mexico. I was out there really, really doing that type of thing. So politics was never on my radar. It was never my thing to do. I really wasn't involved with that type of thing, but I was always like a leader, like a community leader. I was always mentoring young people, and trying to help young people to, get their lives on track and that type of thing. And when I came home and I decided to retire from playing basketball, because the year I retired, my brother passed away. And I wanted to come home to be with my family. And I wanted to go partner up with an organization called the Midlands Fatherhood Coalition. And the Midlands Fatherhood Coalition was all about helping men to become better men in the lives of their children. And I had just started my nonprofit organization, the New Economic Beginnings Foundation. So when I decided to partner with the Fatherhood Coalition, they said, listen, we'd love for you to give you a spot to work here with us. And I said, man, well, I don't know everything about nonprofits, so let me come on in there. Let me learn some stuff. So I took the job with them, and I helped a young person who had just recently graduated college to get a job there also. And he came to work upset one day. He was like, he had said he had been stopped 3 times in 3 days by the police officers. They had searched him and they had let him go. And I asked him, I said, no ticket? He said he didn't get a ticket or a warning. And I said, did you report them for this? Because that's not right. He said, no, I don't report any of this stuff because this is just what happens in my community. And if I do that, I'll have a target on my back. So at that point, we were having an event in my community about bridging the gap between police and the community members. So it was like a coincidence. So I went, and the police officers there were talking about how they had a fantastic relationship with the community members. And it didn't sit right with me because I had just talked to this young person about that situation. And I got up to speak about this, and they were denying any, that they didn't have a good relationship with the community members. I said, well, you're lying to me because I just talked to a young person. And after I went on to kind of chat them about this relationship, I got a standing ovation. And I was a young guy. I got a standing ovation. I was, oh my goodness. So on my way out of the door, leaving that event, a gentleman tapped me on my shoulder, and he was like, and I turned around, he's like, Jermaine, said, you're exactly what we need. Like, you're a young guy. You are the future. Like, these young people look up to you, and we need somebody that's like you to kind of step up and do these types of things as a leader. And that person was State Representative Joe Neal. And if anybody knows who Joe Neal was, he was instrumental in getting the Confederate flag taken off of our State House Capitol building. And he became my mentor. He taught me about politics. He taught me about these types of things. And then that's pretty much how I got involved. I kind of got discovered by Representative Joe Neal. And I just, kind of the rest is history.
It's interesting to me. So I know every place is not like this, but it's sometimes I think, particularly even politically, people can sort of hold on to power for too long. And it's like, we need more gentlemen like him mentoring the next generation of leaders, business-wise, politically. So when I first announced that I was going to run for mayor, 2005, I'm 37 years old. So we had a congressman, Democratic congressman from Augusta. He was retired, Doug Bernard, Congressman Doug Bernard. Doug was good friends with my dad. He was 83 years old, but he was the first person to write a letter to the editor on my behalf. He got out and campaigned like nobody's business, but he always would foster new political leadership in Augusta. And sometimes it's just like, once people get in there, they don't want to ever come out. So I love hearing that you had a political mentor.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're saying about the individual who was 83 who assisted you, because when the way I got into office, I actually had to run in a primary. And I was 30, I might have been 32, 33 when I decided to run. And when I decided to run, the person who I was running against, I actually told him I didn't want to run against him. I wanted to succeed him after he was done. And he told me out of his own mouth, he did not believe in succession planning. And he didn't believe in that type of thing. And this person at that point was literally 50 years older than me. He was in his 80s. Gosh. He has served in the House for 22 years, and I'm asking him for his mentorship in saying I didn't want to run against him, but he didn't believe in succession planning. He didn't believe in mentoring, and he was 50 years older than me. And that essentially inspired me to actually jump out there, because I looked at him, I said, what does this 83, 84-year-old man have in common with my little 7-year-old daughter? He can't inspire her about a future because he literally won't be a part of that future. And I ran against him, and I unseated him and became the first Black and the youngest to represent my district of House District 80 before the lines were redrawn.
Well, and I always talk to people about leadership does not know an age. So as I say, I was 37 years old, but also I'm 56. What I'm doing now to a good degree is mentoring and training up that next generation of leaders, because I had 9 years in office, and but I'm like, if we don't mentor and train up that next generation, what would make them do that to the generation behind them? And once again, it's just, you look at Congress. So now Gen Z and millennials are, I believe, 40% of the voters in the United States of America. And the average age of, sort of goes to your point, this representative and your child, but the average age of people in Congress is like 67 or something. I'm like, there's just that fundamental disconnect there. We need a whole new generation of leaders.
Yeah, I'm one of the very few Democrats that have signed on to the term limits pledge. I believe in term limits. I believe in succession planning. I created the very first thing that I did, and when I got elected, was create a leadership development fellowship in my district for young people in my district, to teach them about leadership in politics, to teach them about leadership in community, in schools, in your job, whatever it is that you want to do. And I've identified many young people that will be able to potentially take my place, because I don't plan on being here forever. And I need to leave my district better than the way I found it. And it's ridiculous to be somebody who likes to hog power and just, hold the communities back.
Our current mayor, Garnet Johnson, who I helped talk into running, but we're really good friends. And I told him, we had a meeting yesterday with a new company here in town, $800 million investment and like 200 new jobs. But I was telling, it's a German company, but I was telling them that I told Garnet at the beginning, I said, look, man, when you get elected mayor, you don't owe me anything, because all I want is a mayor that I can be proud of and the community can be proud of. And he has stayed to that standard throughout. But I'm like, we have such a good partnership, because he knows I don't want to be mayor again, but I want to see him be the best mayor we can possibly have.
Right. And I got a phone call from one of the very first Black elected officials here in the state of South Carolina, I.S. Levy Johnson. And when and that was on the night of my election, when I won my election, he called me and he told me, said, Jermaine, you literally just got elected 50 years to the day that I made history. And he said, Jermaine, whatever it is that you need, I am here and I'm committed to making sure that you are successful because your legacy is my legacy. And that's the type of selfless leadership that we need. We need individuals like that to invest.
No, and I mean, I knew we were going to hit it off when we had the text exchange, but I'm like, we see things the same way, but it's to me, and I would tell people, I'm a literalist, but when I was a public servant, I was there to serve the public. I was not there to primarily serve. I'm independent, nonpartisan local races here in Georgia, but I was not there to serve a party primarily or a special interest group. I was there to serve the people. But that is, to be a public servant, that's got to be about selfless service. So I'm glad that you just referenced that. And guys like you are out there. It's just, I don't think you guys are the ones getting the mainstream media attention.
Right. We're not the big name guys and things like that. But, you know, in my district in particular, so I go speak at the Republican meetings when there's Republican meetings in my district. I hang out. I've been to plenty of meetings where I'm the only black guy in the room and everybody else is an old white male, you know, and we're talking about these things and we're talking about the same things and concerned about the same things that everybody else is concerned with. And I think we need to get away from being afraid to have these conversations with people. You know, in my district in particular, I do better than Congressman Clyburn in my district. You know, I get a lot of crossover support. A lot of Republicans vote for me, a lot of independents and those types of things like that. And I think if we have more conversations, then we get more understanding and we can actually come to some sort of agreement and some sort of a compromise to fix things for the vast majority of Americans.
And that is so important, and we'll get into the Forward Party. So I've never been a member of a political party, but you've been endorsed by the Forward Party, which, you know, I'm now on the advisory board of. But so it's based on, you know, principles, really. It's you agree to sign on to say, I will behave with dignity and integrity. I will treat everybody with, you know, integrity and respect, or with dignity and respect, but I will also uphold the rule of law. And so we had a comms meeting last week, and Lindsay, our CEO, was saying, man, we're getting beaten up on social media for what do you stand for if you're endorsing Democrats and Republicans? I said, get away from the social media, because I'm out there talking. I engage at the grassroots level, not just in Augusta, but wherever I go. And when I tell people that the Forward Party requires their candidates that they endorse to sign on to these principles, they don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican. They're like, well, good. That gives some sort of degree of accountability.
Right. And I think that if people understood those things more than they're looking at these echo chambers of social media, then things would be a little different, you know, because social media right now is not the social media when it first was developed. Social media now has got lots of bots on there. It's got lots of AI, lots of deceptive, propaganda, you know, and they're just trying to draw people into these different little echo chambers of opposite ends of the spectrum. And I don't think that's what's true for the vast majority of Americans. You know, I spend a lot of time at Republicans' houses, you know, hanging out with their families, going to parties and getting to know them, getting to know their kids. Because what's the point of me sitting around with a bunch of Democrats all day long who are all doing this? We're all doing this all the time.
Yeah.
I don't need that. I need somebody who's going to say no, so I can figure out, well, why are you saying no? So we can come to some sort of a compromise to figure out what it is in your experience that has you saying no, so that we can both say, yeah, all right, you know, let's understand this.
You know, and that's what I've often said. I'm like, look, I don't think you're ever going to grow as a person. And I think, you know, people say change, and I'm like, I think we should evolve as people, but you're never going to grow or evolve in your views if you're only talking to people that look like you, act like you, and think like you in that echo chamber. And I'm like, you see that, you know, I'm a member of our country club, but so the prevailing wisdom in the men's grill at the Augusta Country Club when I first ran was that I would not get 6% of the vote. But I'd been out there on the street running a nonprofit, interacting at the grassroots level. But I'm like, you know, the men's grill at a country club or the barbershop too, those can be places that people are talking like they know everything about what's going on in the community. I'm like, when have you ever gone and talked to somebody that didn't look like you?
Right. And that's the thing, man. Most people they feel comfortable talking to the people that look like them, sound like them, agree with them, you know, and they don't know anything about, you know, respectfully disagreeing or coming to people and saying somebody that says something the complete opposite. Like I'm like I said, I'm a Democrat. I get emails from the people who are like the super far rights and saying, oh, why, this, I'm a pro-lifer, none of that stuff. And they expect me not to respond. I respond to them and I call them on the phone and I say, come on to my office. Let's talk about it. Let's get on the phone. And they're like, man, like this guy's, he's a little different. I don't shy away from that type of stuff. I welcome it. I bring it on. I say, come on, let's discuss this so we can figure this thing out.
Man, you want to run for president?
Somebody's already asked me that too.
Yeah. Well, but I'll tell you that about that. So that is leadership to me. You have to have the courage to be able to. There was a prime minister in Israel, I believe it was Moshe Dayan, who said years and years ago, he said, if you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies.
Yes.
And I believe in that. But I'll tell you, leadership in politics is rewarded. So Brian Kemp, our governor, is a good friend of mine, and I've gotten to know Brad Raffensperger too. But they did not kowtow, after the 2020 election to President Trump.
Right.
So they both won. They won in their primaries with landslides, and actually Brian ran against somebody that the President Trump put up against him, but then won big time in the general. But I had so many people tell me, look, even my brother was Southeast Regional Director for FEMA in the Clinton administration. He's never voted for a Republican, but he said, I voted for Trump and Raffensperger. And I had so many Democrats tell me that. They're like, because they exercise leadership.
Right. Right. And that's something that we have gotten away from, man. We've gotten away from allowing people to make their own decisions based on who they want to vote for and who they believe is best to represent them and their families. And we are out here shaming people for this stuff, and I'm just like, listen, just give us the facts, give us the information, give us the data, and allow people to make their own decisions, because I believe most Americans will make the best decisions for them and their families. That's just what will happen, and I've had these conversations with plenty of Republicans, and they're like, dude, you gave me the facts, Jermaine. I'm aligned with you. I'm like, yeah, I know. So stay away from that. Like, I have one thing that I would probably get some flack about is I have meetings with some of the Moms for Liberty women and chairs, and we talk about certain things about schools and books and those types of things. And they're like, man, why are you a Democrat having a conversation with the Moms for Liberty people like that? Like, what are you doing? I say, well, I want to know what it is that they're concerned about, and I want them to know what it is that I'm concerned about. And I want to talk about these things, and let's figure it out.
Well, I used to say when I was in office that sometimes, and I'd love to get your insight on this, it can be like high school on steroids. Oh, yeah. So the first time I went into the Capitol after I was elected, my first campaign guy was a Republican lobbyist. And so we came out of somebody's office, and there were a bunch of Democrat lobbyists across the way. And he goes, oh, man, look at all those sharks. I'm like, dude, what are you, a dolphin? I'm like, but it's that. I'm like, come on. If we don't talk with each other, we're never going to resolve our issues.
Right. The question I like to ask, well, how do you expect us to actually get something done? How do you expect it to always be war? It doesn't always have to be war. We can figure something out. And with the conversations that I've had with people on conservation, on different type, majority of these issues that Americans are dealing with every day, we agree on. But it's the pathway in which we want to get to that destination is what we disagree on. And that is what we need to discuss and figure out. But the majority of people want good health care. They want good education. They want good paying jobs. They want healthy families, and they want safe communities. I don't know anybody that does not want that stuff. But for some reason, we have allowed individuals to polarize this stuff and make it look like we are just in opposite ends of the spectrum.
No, and it is so bad. So I was telling somebody recently, last year I spoke at the National Governors Association meeting in New Hampshire, and it was about Spencer Cox had the Disagree Better program. He was the chair, Republican governor of Utah. But I said, it's there. So there are 500 bridging organizations in the United States that are active. They're doing great work. I'm a founding partner with Starts With Us. But there's a gentleman, Andy, that's head of One America, which is a faith-based organization. But he said 40% of ministers nationwide, all denominations, are thinking about leaving the church because their congregations are so divided. I'm like, this stuff is a cancer, man, and we got to get rid of it. But we're not going to get rid of it if we aren't willing to have a conversation.
The most segregated day is Sunday.
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I think that we need to be looking at. There was a reason why there was separation between church and state, and all these different types of things that we have going on. But I understand, because when you get in that pulpit, you have somebody up there that is a revered a community person, community-minded individual, and they're looking to that person for guidance. But when you start coming to church and your morals and your values don't align with that, that preacher, or that pastor, or that that church official, that creates conflict in itself. And I understand why you would want to leave the church if you have somebody up there that's driving that force.
Yeah, well, I've got a great friend. He's a young minister. He's 40 years old. He's the head pastor at First Baptist Church here in Augusta. But he was 30-something when he first came. And he said, we had a Wednesday night supper, and somebody was wearing a MAGA hat. And he said, sir, I'm sorry that you're going to have to take that off. He said, well, why? He said, because we are here to worship God, and that's a distraction. And I agree with that. The over politicization of religion is not a healthy thing. And I'm like, but I've told people, I'm like, so I'm a Christian, and I do not begrudge anybody else their faith tradition. But I'm like, okay, Jesus says the table is open to all.
Yes.
But if we're members of churches where we're like, okay, you got to come from this neighborhood or be of this socioeconomic background, I'm like, if he puts no limitations on who can come, how do we do that? But it's the same thing with the political parties.
So I'm actually a deacon in my church. So I'm a Christian as well, and a deacon in my church, and I do a lot of work in my community, on behalf of my church. And I truly believe that 100% also what you just stated there. How can we deny certain people? Jesus did not deny the sick or the shut in or any of these individuals. And if we truly believe in these Christian values, or and pretty much in most faiths, it's like, all right, we are accepting of people. And if you want to go ahead and go against what you're saying, then I truly believe that you're not representing your religion correctly.
I agree with you, but it's funny. I've got a friend that was a great friend of mine in college. He is an evangelical Christian, but we still can have conversations, but he is very much MAGA. And a number of months ago, I said, Mark, you realize that not everybody coming over the southern border are rapists and murderers. And he said, yes, they are. And I'm like, how can anybody believe that? And I'm like, I pray for our southern border. Do we have bad people coming across? Yes. But do we have Christians coming across seeking asylum, trying to find a better life for them and their families? I pray for them every day. And I'm like, how can we not have a heart as based on our faith for those people that are leaving countries and traveling all the way to get here?
Absolutely, man. So, like I said in the beginning, that I used to play professional basketball, and I played in Mexico. And during that time, I actually was able to get my brother a tryout with one of my basketball teams while I was out there. Well, he came out there, he made the team. He stayed, he found a wife, got married, had some kids. And then in 2015, when he passed away from a car accident, that's when I retired and came back home. But his wife and children are still in Mexico, and none of them speak English. But they were, so I speak fluent Spanish. So that's the only way that I can communicate with my nieces and nephews is by speaking Spanish. But I take great offense to people saying things like anybody that's coming over here looking for a better life or looking for are rapists and murderers and things, because you're talking about literally my family members, people that have my blood, that share my DNA, and people that just want to be a part of my family. And that right there is really just disrespectful, and is very narrow-minded to not get to know some of these people. So during the time that I was in Mexico and traveling around the country of Mexico, I met far more people in Mexico that said that they were afraid to come to America because of the guns that they see in the media, that because of what they see in the media. They said they had no desire whatsoever to come to America. Then I saw people saying, I want to come to America. And we see there's different parts of Mexico where lots of Americans are actually going to settle in Mexico, and they're getting away from America to go out there and build their own civilizations.
The same thing from what I understand about Costa Rica. A lot of Americans are moving south of the border and everything. But it's so funny to me when, okay, if you're an immigrant, unless you are a Native American, your family came from someplace else. We've always been a great melting pot. Do we need, Democrats and Republicans admit we've got a problem with immigration, but it's just, when the Senate came up with a bipartisan way to deal with it, and then one individual shot it down because he didn't want to see the president get a win. I'm like, how is that serving the greater good of your nation?
And, it's not. And it's even happening like that on a local level. We have great legislation that is being proposed here in South Carolina. But because it has a Democrat's name as the title sponsor of it, it's just sitting in the closet somewhere. And essentially, we have Democrats who will take legislation that was passed in Republican red states and introduce it here in South Carolina. But it doesn't get a second look because it has a Democrat's name on it. And they don't want to allow the other side get a win. And that's the same thing going on in Washington. It's like if it has a Democrat's name on it, it won't get passed, or if it has a Republican's name on it, it won't get passed. And I think that needs to be put to bed immediately, because it doesn't matter if it comes from Republican, Democrat, Independent. If it's a good idea and it can help the millions of Americans that are struggling, then pass the damn legislation.
Man, preach on, brother. But you are doing something that I want to talk to you about this. So Dwight Eisenhower talked about always having the courage to speak truth to power. Yes. And that's what I don't see a lot of in Washington. It's like, I can't, here again, I'm happily independent, but all the people that were never Trumpers that now just swear fealty to him, I'm like, and even I'll say with Vice President Harris, she was not the number one choice of Democrats, but then she raised $500 million but it's people want to be close to power and control. And I'm like, I'm a character guy. And if I had to sacrifice my character to get ahead in business or get ahead in an election, I wouldn't do it. My character is too important to me.
Right. And that's exactly how I ran for office the first time. So when I ran for office, I ran against the establishment. I ran against the incumbents, the incumbents, everybody. I didn't have all those super endorsements. I didn't have all that stuff that was going on. And that's why people were counting me out, because it's like, man, who's this young guy who has the audacity to run against, this 22-year incumbent who's got the love and support of all these longtime, senators and things. I mean, all the senators came out against me. The school board members came out against me. All these people came out against me. But the people who were on the ground, the grassroots people, they knew who I was. They knew I hung out with the kids, whether they were black or white. They knew I was involved with the Recreation Commission, whether they were black, white, Republican, Democrat, whatever. They knew I would show up to their house, whether they were black, white, Republican, Democrat. Yep. They knew who I was. They knew my character. And that right there is what proved to be the defining factor in my race, is that they knew me as a person.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you. So Peaches Barnes, who is she won the Democratic primary in Florence, and she does not have a Republican opponent in November, but her brother was the president of Payne College, our HBCU, when I was in office. So he called her after she won the primary and was like, you need to bring on Deke right now as an advisor for the next 4 years. But I'm like, grassroots engagement, if it is where I live, and I'm like, you keep your finger on the pulse. Yes. But I think, doing what you're doing, talking to Democrats, Republicans, meeting with people at the grassroots level, then it's people know you. So if somebody attacks you, it's like, no, that guy, Jermaine, was just sitting in my living room last week. So I think so many politicians just get so insular and so siloed, they just really have no clue what's going on at the grassroots level.
You can do a simple search on social media, on Facebook, if you want to. And when you look up on there, you can look like things that have been said about me. People in my district down here, the Republicans, they be like, man, we got to get rid of all those damn Democrats, except for Jermaine. We got to keep Jermaine. They're like, no, he's the one we can keep, Yeah. I've gone to the houses of these guys flying the big Trump flags, like they got the big Trump flags. And they're like, Jermaine, you're the only damn Democrat that I like. So I'm like, well, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for that. But it's that type of thing that I think that people are so out of touch. Politicians are so out of touch with what the people are really struggling with. And I think we could do so much better. I get laughed at a lot too, because people always ask me, are you going to this event? Like I didn't go to the DNC, right? So
Yeah.
people always ask, like, are you going to this? Are you going to be at that? I said, no. I said, is it happening in Lower Richmond? Lower Richmond is my district. I said, is it happening in Lower Richmond? They were like, no. I was like, well, I ain't going to be there. All right. So if it ain't happening in my community, then I'm not going, because I am all about what's going on in my community.
Man, I did the same thing for 9 years in office. But what I've told the Forward Party, and I wrote a op-ed that came out a couple months ago, is that I know the Forward Party is going to work because in 3 elections as a candidate, I stayed positive. I was inclusive. I focused on bringing my community together on common ground, won those 3 elections with an average of 62% of the vote. Then this spring, I ran a campaign for our mayor, a ballot referendum to get him a vote. So we did the same thing. Positive, inclusive, uplifting, 74% of the vote. But I'm like, if people are given an alternative, like you're just keeping it real. I'm like, people say it is so refreshing to hear politicians that are real and authentic and aren't speaking in sound bites or, political rhetoric. People are just sick of that. I know I am.
Yeah, and I'm more than sick of it. So it's funny because when I first meet some people that are like on the opposite end of the spectrum, they're skeptical in the very beginning. Like they're skeptical. Like, is this the first honest politician I've ever met? Like,
yeah,
and they're very skeptical on it. But then my consistency, who I've been over the past, 20 years, they're like, oh man, like this guy, this is just who this guy is, and I've had people that have said like, they're saying, I've seen you and I've been near you, but you didn't know I was near you. And I've seen you and I wanted to just check to see if you really are the person that you are. And you really are that person. I'm like, well, yeah, like I don't have anything to go against. I'm going to be myself all the time.
Yeah. And that consistency, but I would tell people that, for 9 years in office, 95% of what I did was not in front of the cameras. It was out there on the streets with the people. And I'm like, that is where I get my energy. And I'm like, but it's so funny. And I've told this story many times. So at the National Governors Association meeting last summer or in New Hampshire I think it was a year ago, but you had like 500 people, Black, white, Democrat, Republican, from old, young, from all over the country saying, we've got a problem. We got to work together. And I'm like, this is what people want to see. So we had, Starts With Us, the nonprofit I'm affiliated with, we did a study, I think it was with Dartmouth, that showed that 75% of Americans want to see Congress work together in bipartisan fashion to solve the big problems. Well, then we had the debacle with the Speaker of the House, and somebody asked Jim James, who's one of the candidates to fill that spot, are we going to have a coalition government in Washington? He goes, no way, because nobody wants to see that. I'm like, how out of touch? I mean, if you're just only, as you say, around those Republicans, yeah, your party, nobody wants to see that. But I think a lot of Americans would be like, woohoo, that's what we need.
That's exactly what the majority of Americans would be doing. They'd be cheering that on. And when so I was the campaign chairman for Andrew Yang when he was running for president, right here in South Carolina. And I set up one of his events out here when he was doing kind of like a forum. And in that event, he goes, how many people, raise your hand if you're a Democrat, part of the room, raise their hand. Raise your hand if you're a Republican, part of the room, raise their hand. Raise your hand if you're a Green Party. Some people raise their hand. If you're independent, raise their hand. And Congressman Clyburn was there in the room. He saw this taking place. And that was probably one of the most beautiful moments that I had ever seen from a presidential candidate, is showing that this is what Americans truly want, and that he had the ability to bring people together. And that was one thing that Congressman Clyburn had to comment on, was that he had never seen a forum that was so diverse of different people to come together to support one individual for the common good of everybody.
And then that is exactly what we need. But that is why, and I've told people with the Forward Party, I'm like, I've never been a part of a political party, but I'm going all in on Forward. And it's here again, some people, well, you don't stand for anything. I'm like, principles. Because right now, neither party can say that they're the party of principles, but that's enough for me. I mean, that should be common ground in and of itself. But I tell people about it and they're like, isn't that what kids are taught in kindergarten, that you're supposed to be nice to each other and everything? I'm like, they're like, does a party really need to remind people of that? I said, unfortunately, it does, because we reward bad behavior. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene gets 10 times more coverage than anybody else in Congress for behaving badly. And I'm like, we have got to stop. And I wish the media would do it, rewarding bad behavior, because that is a big reason why we've gotten to this point.
Yeah, we've got two parties of trying to one up each other right now. I mean, everybody's trying to, I can do something better than that, and I can one up you, and I can one up that person. And I think that's the issue that we have, is everybody's trying to top the other party. And when they do that, that there again creates more sound bites, creates more media opportunities, creates more of the polarization. And we're just like, and us, we're in the middle. We're just like, let's just get along. Like, let's solve a problem. Let's look at the data. Let's solve a problem. And I think there's more Americans that really want to solve a problem, but they just really don't know about the options that they have in terms of, like, the Forward Party and things like that, to really bring people together. And we're not getting the respect that we deserve right now.
No, and I'm so glad I've had several people from Ford on my show, but the more people, people just generally don't know about Ford. Right. But when I'm out there educating people about it, not trying to say, you definitely need to do this, you need to do that, you need to renounce your affiliation with the Democrats or the Republicans. I'm like, this is a party of common ground. And once again, it starts with those principles. But it's funny, I've done a lot of dealing with the young Fordists, who are the on-campus proxy for Ford. But basically, Gabe McGuire, their president, who's a freshman at Penn, said, look, I'm 18 years old. Toxic polarization is all I've ever known. And I think my generation deserves better. And I'm like, I totally agree.
I've said this, and I've had this conversation with a number. Matter of fact, just as recently as last weekend, I was sitting down with one of my Republican colleagues, and we were laughing and joking. And there were some people there were like some Republicans and Democrats from another state, and they were looking at me, interacting with my Republican colleague. Laughing. They were like, "Man, y'all should not be having this much fun together, like the way that you're doing." And I was like, this is insane that this is how you all believe. But the thing that I've always been telling people that I continue to talk to individuals about is, I don't think it's going to be my generation, but it's going to be the generation that after me, and maybe my children's generation, because our offspring, we are much more tolerant of other individuals. We're much more accepting. We're much more loving. And I think that, when you look at our leaders right now, they are literally the leaders from the civil rights era. They are literally those same leaders that were in office during civil rights are leading us in 2024 with those same thoughts, that same rhetoric, utilizing the same tactics. And that doesn't work today, because we are moving further along. We're moving closer together, and we have a big melting pot here in America.
Well, so right now in downtown Augusta, we've got the Arts in the Heart Festival. It's been going on for decades. Now it brings over 100,000 people into our downtown over a 3-day period to celebrate diversity, arts, and culture. But yet our politics are portrayed to be black and white. Yep. And I'm like, that is the Augusta that I see. I love that festival, because it is, and we've never had an incident there. So I'm like, that's America to me. And that's what we all need to. But here again, if you're just in your little bubble, you don't see it. And you've got a blind spot, because America is changing. I mean, Gen Z is the most diverse generation ever. And it's just going to get more and more diverse as we go along.
Yeah, and it's crazy, because right now, just even saying the word diversity is like a punch in the right eye. It's a scare tactic that's being utilized right now. Just saying that word, and I took the time out myself. So we had the members of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus and the Republican Party that were pushing this ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion here in South Carolina. And instead of me going out there and saying some crazy stuff, I took it upon myself to have a sit-down, one-on-one conversation with the member of the Freedom Caucus to discuss what diversity really means and that type of thing there, And I said, listen, we don't want indoctrination either. Like I don't want that. We don't want it. So there's the commonality right there. We both agree with this on the same thing. Neither one of us want indoctrination. But don't you think that it would be better to have me sit inside with you and help you craft this legislation so that you have somebody like me that can think about things that you didn't think about, so we can come up with the best product possible, instead of just the same looking individuals who are talking in this echo chamber coming up with policy that is essentially going to affect my life. Let's sit around and let's talk about this.
No, it's so funny. So we have two corgis. We had one that was diagnosed with lymphoma in 2020. So we started traveling with them, and we had to go to Columbia to get treatment because the only other place was the University of Georgia. So we've spent 2 years going back and forth. I mean, we stayed at the Graduate and we ate at Halls a lot because they'd let the dogs be there. The homeless people that are there between the Capitol and Halls, we got to be friends with all of them. Mm-hmm. And so they still have my cell phone number. They still call me because I gave them my book. But but people, there can be a mindset. I've talked to some people, well, homeless people just want to be homeless. I'm like, how many homeless people do you know? And they're like, well, I'm like, because I know a bunch of homeless people in Columbia, and I can guarantee you they do not want to be homeless. So it's just so easy to put everybody in a basket and paint with a broad brush. But life is not black and white. It's nuanced. And one thing I told people is I'm like, didn't matter if it was the homeless people, the staff at Halls, or we'd take them down to Charleston and everything. Everybody loved those dogs. I'm like, it didn't matter if they were black, white, rich, poor, whatever. I'm like, well, at least you can agree that you like our dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you asked that question about, how many homeless people do you actually know, right? Because, I've spent time in the shelter. I spent time in the shelter teaching, job skills and life skills development, that type of stuff, and giving talks to the people who live in the transitions homeless shelter. And talking to these individuals, you get to hear their stories, exactly how they became homeless. And they are no different than any of us.
Not at all.
They fell on hard times. Somebody got sick. Maybe it was a divorce. Somebody lost their job. I mean, it's something as simple as, because most Americans are living paycheck to paychecks. You're literally 1 or 2 checks away from ending up just like them. And you do not want people to be judging you based on a hard time that you fell on. We need to be helping these people out of these situations. So, the more people you talk to, the more understanding you get as to how people end up in their situation. And you'll have a little bit more empathy and sympathy for these people.
Well, and that's the thing to me is, in the Bible, we're the least of these are referenced.
Yes.
So my views are not necessarily based on politics. They're based on my faith. I'm like, okay, if you're healthy and can work and have access to a job, you should work.
Right.
I understand realistically, not everybody wants to work. That's the reality of the situation. But also, if you cannot take care of yourself, I think that a combination of government, the private sector, nonprofit sector, and churches should take care of the people that can't take care of themselves and hopefully lift them up and bring them back into society. But, and I know, like I say, it can be a bad break. And to demonize the poor and the homeless, I'm like, that does not help fix that problem.
Yeah, well, you've got to be your brother's keeper. And, and I believe, what are we here for if we're not here to serve others? And I think we have to do a better job at serving others and understanding other people's situations, and that comes with exposure, getting outside of your community, getting outside of your environment. I've had politicians that have said to me like, oh, be careful going in that neighborhood over there, Jermaine, or don't go over there, or don't go to that place or that. And I'm like, dude, no, that's exactly where I want to be. I want to be where the people have never seen somebody like me before, so I could be accessible and tangible.
No, man. One of my favorite things to do every year was to ride in the Martin Luther King parade here. So my wife and I would always take a friend. We don't have kids, but take a couple that were friends of ours and their kids. Because when I was in office, we started the Laney Walker Bethlehem Redevelopment Initiative. So, which Harvard Student Magazine called it a game changer. But I'm like, they would be amazed to see what was going on in that area of the city because they were socialized, stay away, it's dangerous. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, so our Martin Luther King parade is bigger than the Christmas parade, but most people on my side of town don't even have any idea that it goes on. I'm like, I love doing that, but people were like, oh my gosh, look at the great things going on in this neighborhood. But I know I was raised to stay away from that neighborhood. But I'll tell you, so when I was 17 years old, I was hired to lay tile right out of high school. So the tile mechanics lived in that neighborhood, these older black gentlemen that didn't have driver's licenses. So they would send me down to pick these guys up. And these guys were, they were craftsmen. But as a teenager, I got to know the needs of that neighborhood, which really, made me focus. That neighborhood needs help, and so able to do that. But here again, we should be each other's keeper, our brother's keeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I always say to people is when you're looking at a community and you're looking at a neighborhood and you're doing your assessment of it. And there's 10,000 people in there. How does anybody know their thinking is wrong if everyone around them thinks the same?
Yeah.
And I say that all the time to people. How do you know your thinking is wrong if everyone around you is thinking the same? You don't know until some outside person comes in and says, wow, maybe y'all should take a look at this. Or until you take somebody that's from that community and you take them out of that and you expose them to another environment. That's what happened to me. Me playing basketball, I come from a rough upbringing, a tough background where I've seen drugs and murder and jail and those types of things. But I got taken out of my environment. And when I saw snow for the first time when I went to prep school for basketball, I saw stars in the sky. I saw people wearing shirts and ties. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this here? And that's when I realized, I said, man, there's different things that are out there versus what I'm essentially seeing every single day. And I learned different things. And that essentially started my life to be on a different track to do different things. But if these people don't have those opportunities, if nobody's going there to try to help some of these people, they will always be forever cursed to live that life.
Yeah. And that's the thing to me is that, I always had a presence in all these neighborhoods and everything. And I'm like, just to be able to show compassion. But I was talking to the former CEO of Starbucks, who's he's 70 something years old now. I can't remember his name, but he's always focused on servant leadership. And I said, how is it today that compassion, kindness, all of these things that are great traits of a servant leader, that's portrayed as weakness by some. And I'm like, that is a great strength, but really we're socialized in different environments. If I was raised in your environment, my worldview would be different. If you were raised in mine, doesn't make it bad or wrong. Right. It's just different because you were socialized differently.
Right. And I think we need to do a better job of understanding that everybody's upbringing, everybody's experiences are different. And we can't really fault people for their upbringing because they did not choose to be born. And God loves you and you ain't had nothing to do with it. That's shout out to my buddy Javar Warris who gave me that quote. God loves you and you had nothing to do with it. And you are here and we have to do the best that we can with what we were given. And we have to have some more compassion for understanding people who come from these different situations, these different lifestyles, but also those people that come from those lifestyles, we have to make sure they do a better job of being able to receive the information. So communications is two-way, and we got to make sure that the sender and the receiver, that the message is being received appropriately.
Well, man, we could literally talk all day, and I hope we'll get a chance to. Next time, my wife and I are like, we got to go back to Columbia to see everybody at the Graduate. So if I'm up there, I'm going to give you a call.
Come on and hang out with us, man. Come on down
to I will. Yeah. It's just an hour away. But as we get down towards the end, and man, you will be back again. And it is just refreshing. And I hope for my viewers and listeners, it's like, well, all Democrats are this way or all Republicans. I'm like, no. Meet my friend Jermaine.
Yeah,
it's pretty damn cool, I think. And I don't, but I'm like, I never would hate somebody for a D and an R.
Right.
That's ridiculous. But so, where can people find you?
Well, they can just go to my website, johnsonforsc.com. I'm on all social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, Dr. JL Johnson. You can go Instagram, same thing, TikTok. I'm still trying to get used to this TikTok thing, man. I don't use it. I got my 3 videos up there, man, but I'm trying to get used to it. So.
Okay. Well, now the final question: on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
My children. And I know that's probably cliche, man, but my children absolutely do. They are loud. They are rambunctious. But my children are living a life that they will, that they have no idea that they can just be children. My children are just children.
Yeah.
And my upbringing, I couldn't just be a child. Like my children are being children, and I get to look at them can be concerned about things that, like, oh my God, this girl is wearing the same shirt as me, or oh my God, like
Yeah.
I this boy likes me at school. Like they are just worried about normal things. When I was
Yeah.
coming up, I was worried about what I was going to eat for dinner. You know,
Yeah.
my children will never have to be concerned about that. So me seeing them is happy and be children puts a smile on my face every day.
Man, I will tell you, we're definitely kindred spirits, and I look forward to having a beer with you next time I'm in Columbia. But
as long as it's a blue moon.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. I loved going to halls though. So I saw Jim Clyburn there, and I saw all these people that I'd known when I was in office. My wife is like, "You're just in your element." So even getting involved with the Forward Party, I'm like, well, I get to, I've run a campaign this year. I'm getting involved, but I don't have to be in office. And so I'm like, it's the best of both worlds for you. That's what I tell my wife.
Yeah.
But man, I will tell you, thank you for being a tremendous guest and being a phenomenal public servant, man. And good luck in your election. I mean, South Carolina needs more people like you. Georgia does too. Every place does.
Yeah, well, the one thing about this, I've been blessed to be unopposed in this election cycle. So I didn't have a primary and I don't have a general. Myself and the Republican who I was supposed to run against, we actually just talked it out. And he was like, Jermaine, listen, I'd rather work with you than run against you. So he decided not to run against me. And he ran for county council chair in Kershaw County, and he won. So now me and him working on some things together.
See, that's part of, I'm like, the Lord is doing a great work. And I'm like, I'm trying to use this show to shine a light on it. If you're just watching the mainstream media, that is not where things are happening. It's what you're doing. That is such a good story and so encouraging. Great way to end it. But man, I look forward to seeing you in Columbia.
Man, appreciate you, brother. We're going to halls.
All right, man. That's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.